The Government of Canada released the budget today, and it's pretty interesting to think about some of the implications and the ideas that they're looking at. To me, it really feels like a Paul Martin, Jean Chrétien budget. There's some austerity, quite a bit of austerity, but there's also targeted spending to try and induce certain industries to succeed in Canada. And really, it's an acknowledgement of the current world situation. Think about the focus on military spending. We used to buy our military equipment from the US. Now we recognize that the US is not a stable democracy any longer, not a stable partner any longer, not a country we can trust, and it is in fact a threat to Canada. And so recognizing that, we know that we need to develop our own military industry. Now, military industry is very different than military industry of the past, because what we see in Ukraine is basically drone warfare that is evolving so quickly that you have to be prepared to be making more evolved, advanced drones every day. You have to be reacting and developing those drones. At the beginning of the war, when Russia invaded, Ukraine relied on Bayraktar drones. You may remember the song Bayraktar, drones from Turkey, and they were very effective, but you never hear of them anymore because they are already outdated. And so the Canadian government, not wanting to buy drones from the States or drones from anywhere else, and knowing that we're not likely wanting to be selling that technology to an unreliable partner like the States. We might still sell to NATO partners, maybe Germany and England and European NATO members. But recognizing that fast development and that we have to have in-house production of these things, the federal government is putting a ton of money into developing weapons. Yeah, it's going to meet our NATO target requirements for our spending relative to GDP, or at least approach it. But it's also in recognition of the fact that we've got to do this in-house now. We basically have no choice but to develop this in-house. The other thing they're spending on is essentially resource extraction. So that is recognizing that we are not bringing manufacturing back to Canada the way it was. We can't compete with China. China has got down to the sort of the cheapest of the cheap, to the point where those companies are competing on such small margins with each other. And there are many, many automakers, for example, in China. Eventually, those cars are coming here. We will be selling our raw materials for China to continue to manufacture. They've built plants now to build cars where there's no humans, and they just turn the lights off. They're that advanced and so far ahead of anything we've got. That's not manufacturing jobs that we're going to have in Canada. If we were to develop that type of manufacturing, it wouldn't employ anybody. And of course, they've got unemployment rising in China too. There is an expectation that we are going to be extracting the material that others are going to be using. So we've got the second largest land mass in the world. We are all of the resources, that anything that you would want to mine is available in Canada, and we will be looking at primary processing of that material and extraction of that material, and the government is recognizing that that is going to be our continued role in Canada. Interestingly, they are looking at cutting immigration, so foreign workers coming into the country, and they wouldn't be doing that if they didn't expect that the unemployment rate would rise. And I think they know that we are going to face more unemployment. Unemployment has risen in China. Unemployment is rising in the States in a terrible way. It may be that you can blame AI, but I don't think it's just that. It may be that we can produce more than people need, and it's just an issue of how we actually allocate our resources as a whole, as a society. But there is a recognition, I think, that we are not going to need the same number of people. Now, a lot of Canadians are not going to be interested in some of the jobs that are available, but there may be a bit of a reckoning where people have to face that this is their reality, and this is where they live, and this is where they're situated. People don't really want to go down and be coal miners underground. That's not the type of job that you're going to be looking at. But there's likely going to be more service industry jobs in the future, and that's something that people will just have to deal with. And the federal government, I think, is recognizing that by looking at these cuts of foreign workers coming into Canada. Now, my expectation is the Canadian government, being relatively fair, is going to do what it can to try and keep the people who came here to work and have established themselves here, to let them go through that process of becoming permanent residents and ultimately citizens, because immigrants turn out to be great citizens and good workers overall and contribute a lot to the economy. And we don't want to give the impression to the world that that we're just out to exploit people, because we're not. We actually had a labor shortage that arose from the pandemic, and we had to bring more people in. But that is going to come to an end as unemployment rises, and that's an interesting thing. We are going to see. We're seeing in this budget focused stimulus on certain areas of the economy. Makes perfect sense. Also cutting back in other areas where they're looking at it and saying, okay, the federal government's going to be able to rationalize here. Some things we're not going to expand the way that we intended to expand, or at least the people thought about. And so that's a bit of an austerity budget. And that gives, again, the impression of sort of a Paul Martin, Jean Chrétien budget, where they're trying to wrestle the deficit. At the same time, they're trying to stimulate the economy in certain areas where we can see where things are going 15, 20 years down the road. And so in that sense, it seems like a wise yet difficult to swallow pill here, because, recognizing that we want to maintain our lifestyle and see general improvement, I suspect that we are going to see deflationary pressure. And I'm not talking about prices actually coming down. I'm talking about essentially a significant reduction in inflation and a competition to get to the bottom by a lot of companies. So a lot of companies that have had a lot of profit are going to be wrestling to get every single consumer. And that's where they're going to recognize that we can't make more money by raising prices anymore. We have to try and attract those consumers, and that may be by capping prices, which is going to cut into corporate profits. And corporate profits getting cut into also cuts into the tax base for the federal government. And this is something that I think the federal government is trying to anticipate now. All of this arising, of course, because of the pandemic, and then because of the instability that's been created because of the United States. Now, there's a focus to put a lot of money into attracting people to come to Canada who are highly skilled. And I suspect this is going to end up basically attracting people to come to Canada for certain things, mostly medical. This is a lot of money that they want to put into it. I can't imagine that they are expecting that we are going to bring manufacturing of any significant effect back to Canada. Taking those raw materials and turning them into the next material, maybe, like turning logs into 2x4s, but not that final production in many cases of that product that they expect. But the idea, I think, here is to be on the top of the fact that you're in the intelligence industry. And this is something that California has done so well with, that Canada can do very well with. And it generates a lot of revenue. It's just, America, Donald Trump thinks that they have to have manufacturing in the States. Well, the actual companies that are developing these products and are doing the research are where the money is being made. They're paying somebody else to manufacture the products. They may be an in-between for marketing as well, but there's a significant amount of money that ends up coming back into the system as a result of that. So I think the focus is for that, but I think it's largely going to end up being attracting scientists in the medical community. And that is something that is going to be an expanding market. It's an expanding market, and always has been an expanding market, is public health, and medical advancements. So to me, this seems all pretty rational, and it's just going to be a little getting used to as we're seeing some things cut and some focus on other industries. And it's always upsetting to see a deficit, but sometimes you have to spend in order to be bold and make something happen. And that is where we are in Canada right now, and where we have to be.